Okay, dear.
Well, hello there. Welcome again to the Alan Hudson Podcast, the podcast where you always get proper football and proper talk. Do remember, if you do like what we do on the podcast, please remember to click like and subscribe on our YouTube service. That would be most appreciated if you could do that. Today, it's just Alan and I on the podcast, and we're going to be looking ahead to the crunch last 16 match between England and Germany at Wembley on Tuesday night that the whole nation is looking forward to watching. Welcome, Alan. Big game on Tuesday. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, it's funny when I said to you day before yesterday, I think it was, that in the group stage, because I fancied Portugal all along, and I thought a bit unfortunate last night. But when that group stage was being played and Portugal went from top to second to third to bottom, and it was all going like that. It was very topsy-turvy. Just about showed what this tournament's all about, that anyone... It's so I thought this tournament was so winnable for anybody. And obviously, they went down to 10 men last night, the Dutch. Otherwise, so the Czechs are in there. Austria were very unlucky against Italy, I thought. If they had had a top striker, they would have beaten Italy. So, we'd have had ourselves, an even wider open tournament. So this couldn't be a better opportunity for both teams tomorrow night to fancy themselves. Whoever goes through is going to fancy themselves big time to go to stay at Wembley and win it. Because the other side of the draw is so tough. If they all turn up, if France play tonight, but we'll see how they do. But what happens is, Tony, you'll agree, is that when these smaller nations start getting through and giving the bigger nations a right good game and in a couple of cases going through, it gives the others who haven't played yet that lift. When all the big names are going through and all the so-called smaller countries are getting knocked out, they go into the game a little bit, I wouldn't say half-hearted, but there's no hopers, but everyone's got a chance. This is a wide open Euros you've ever seen, And I said that from I didn't say it before the tournament. I said it after a couple of games. This is, I said everyone was raving about Italy early on. I said, well, wait till they get out of Rome, see how they don't judge them by that. And they stepped outside of Rome and they were a different team. And obviously at Wembley the other night, and they didn't look the same team. So it's so winnable, and that makes tomorrow night's game all the more fascinating, interesting, and both teams will see it as a huge step to get into the final.
Now, before we look in more depth at tomorrow's game between England and Germany, I've got to take you back to 1975, which was incidentally the last time England beat Germany at Wembley. And am I right in saying, would you agree with me when I say it was probably one of the greatest nights of your career?
Yes, it was for a very different reason. It was for the reason that we've spoke about on many occasions, and I've documented in my books, that I was chosen by Don Revie to foul. Really, he could have chosen me a couple of games before that against Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, I think it was. He could have chose Alan Ball before that. He didn't, but I think he had this in his mind that let's play Hudson and Ball against the world champions. And not only that, we had two other debutants in that night. We had Steve Whitworth from Leicester and Ian Gallard from QPR. And so he threw the three of us in at the deep end, so to speak, thinking that would make it more difficult for me. But it actually had the reverse effect on it, because by playing with the two fullbacks, in their first game, I knew they're going to be nervous. I wasn't nervous at all because I was in the top form of my life at that stage. And I just said to both fullbacks, I don't know if they would ever remember, but I said to them, look, just don't keep hitting it. Don't be hitting it into the front players, not against the Germans, because you won't get it back. Let's play it. I'm there all the time. Alan Ball's there all the time. Let's keep knocking it in the midfield. So by them having their first match helped me as well as helping them. And I think Don Revie kind of overlooked that, never saw that. He wasn't smart enough to see that would work in my favour. But yeah, it was one of. I mean, there's certain games. I think you can. All players at the end of their career can count their 5 biggest performances on one hand, and that was certainly one of them. And it was more showing the manager, and then when you get quotes from like Gunter Netzer and Helmut Schön saying, why haven't I ever been selected before? A world class performance. That's what makes it great for me. I do appreciate everybody says always brings it up. It was a great performance, but when people like Netzer say it and Beckenbauer and Schoen say it, I think that's when you can, put the lid on it, really.
Now, a lot of people watching this podcast and listening to what you're saying will find it extraordinary that the manager of the England team is sending out his players, more specifically you and Alan Ball, to fail in a match, and not just fail in any match, fail in a match against the world champions. So can you explain that to us?
Well, the thing that really is mind-boggling and maybe baffling to some people is that how Don Revie, who never won the European Cup with Leeds United, can underestimate a player like Alan Ball, who's won the World Cup. He's won the League Championship with Everton. He's been our best midfield player for years. He's one of my great heroes, and it was such a pleasure to play with him. How can he underestimate a player like that? And he did me the greatest favour by making him captain that night. I think he was the first time he was ever made captain. But he picked Alan for the same reason he picked me. He thought, let's stick them two in and they're foul. And it rebounded. It's much like in the modern game, Southgate waiting to play the world champions and throwing Jack Grealish in and thinking, well, I'll play him in the toughest game. And then once he fouls, then I can kick him out of the team and he ain't got no excuses. And that's the way I see it with this England setup. It's exactly the same. And I was interested the other day that the other great German, Matthias, he said about
Lothar Matthäus.
Lothar Matthäus. He said, why are England not playing this other kid when he's been the best player in Germany for the last 2 seasons? And so history most definitely keeps repeating itself. These managers won't play their best players, and we go back to our best team, I think, and the best chance we ever had was obviously when the last time we played Germany in this competition at Wembley was when Terry Venables was manager, and he picked the best team available. No matter where they come from, there was no bias, there was no favouritism. Terry Venables was, without a doubt, probably apart from Bobby Robson, was the only manager in the history while I've been alive that's picked the best England team. And it showed, and we were so close to going through. If Gascoigne hadn't cut his toenails that afternoon, we probably went through, because he missed it by, like we say today with his VAR, it's all inches and fractions, but he missed by a fraction there, and that was probably we played a lot better in '96. Apart from the first 2 games, I think it was the most exciting era since 1966.
Going back to that game in '75, though, I think Revie probably tried to prepare as meticulously as he normally does, or normally did in those days. Did he not give the squad a load of dossiers to pour over in advance of the game?
Well, I believe that he did this in even to the Leeds players. I've heard. I don't know if it's spot on, and he did it in other internationals. But having this being my first game, I didn't know about these dossiers. But I was handed a dossier. I think it's probably by Les Cocker or someone like that. His little spy, and I never opened it. I never bothered to open it because if you need telling about Franz Beckenbauer, then you shouldn't be playing in the first place. And Don Revie, by what he done leading up to it, by playing us and not wanting us to do well, it was kind of it's like Southgate. It reminds me so much of the Southgate situation where he half wants Jack to foul, Grealish to foul, the same as he wanted me to foul, so he can get him out the team. And that's what eventually happened. I had one more game after that. We beat Cyprus 5-0 in a European Championship. Malcolm McDonald scored the 5 goals, and I wasn't seen again. But I just wish I hadn't have played in that second match because, I'd have just had that 90 minutes against Franz Beckenbauer and the world champions and proved that I could play at that level, which I said I could.
I think you mentioned Helmut Schön earlier, the West Germany manager at the time, and he absolutely was in raptures about your performance at the end of the game. I think the quote was, and now England have got their new Bobby Charlton. That must have made you feel 10 feet tall.
Well, apart from his haircut, but of course, I was told years later that by someone who was a great writer, Ken Jones of the Mirror. He told me years later that at Wembley, when Chelsea played Manchester United in the final, he come up to me. He said, "You do realise had you not got that ankle injury, you would have taken part in 1970." And I said, "Well, Ken, it's something I didn't really want to know because it makes missing that even more hurtful." But yeah, I think Ramsey had me in mind in Mexico. I think when they brought Bobby Charlton off in Mexico, he would have brought me on to replace him because he would have known. Because that season I was getting stronger as the season went on at Chelsea, and I think with my fitness level, he'd have brought me on and said to me, do the job that Bobby's been doing and just watch Beckenbauer coming forward. And obviously, by not doing that, he left a wide open gap for France to come in and get the first goal, which obviously was our downfall. But yeah, when I 5 years on, I had to wait 5 years to actually play my first game, and obviously I had my 3-year ban given to me by Ramsey. But and 5 years on, when Helmut Schön can speak to you in the same breath as Bobby Charlton, I'm not one to get excited about things like that because we're all different types of players. But to be put in to be spoken with in the same breath as Bobby Charlton and Alan Ball, and is it shows you the opposite really of what Don Revie felt. How can one manager who's won the World Cup say that about me, and the other manager who hasn't even won the European Cup, doubt that you have the ability to play? It's like everybody has an opinion, but it's like Grealish at the moment. Will he play Jack tomorrow night? Because Jack will be the man who could unlock the German defence, and they will defend, as England will. It will be a very tight game tomorrow night, and Jack Grealish is the key to unlock that door.
I just want the last question on 75. I'm not sure myself. I've still got to the bottom of why Don Revie wanted you and Alan Ball to fail. I mean, was it a north-south thing between? And I know Alan Ball wasn't from the south, but he probably would have been playing for Would he have been playing for Arsenal at the time?
Yes, he was, and I think if you look at it, Tone, I think years earlier, Alan Ball tells a story, and I think I read it in one of his books. I think when he left Blackpool, who he was playing for, amazingly when he won the World Cup, he had a phone call from Blackpool saying that he was leaving. Someone was in for him, and he phoned his father, and he said there's a team from Yorkshire and a team from Lancashire who want me. He said, well, you're staying in Lancashire. His father told him, and I think the other team was Leeds United, and I think he refused to go to Leeds United, and I think Revie, he was one of those people that held grudges. He held grudges against Osgood for scoring against him in the FA Cup final in 1970. He didn't pick him when he was the best centre forward. So there's a little bit of that in it. He had a long memory going back, and what I can't understand, Tony, and I really can't get my head around this one. If he didn't like me as a player, I can understand it because he has an opinion. But I don't know why he treated me so badly as a person. I had never done anything wrong to him. I'd never had an argument with him. I'd never had a falling out with him. But he seemed to dislike. As you say, there was that divide. Did he not like Londoners? Maybe he gave. People might say, well, he made Jerry Francis captain. He played for Queen's Park Rangers. But did he do that as a kind of a smokescreen? Because he was that devious. And it's something you take to your grave, that you just don't understand why somebody dislikes you for no real reason. And why does Southgate not like Jack Grealish? He was at Aston Villa with Jack. He knows young Jack. He knows he's cocky. He knows he's brash. He knows he's so confident, the kid. He's on that fine line of arrogance. Well, that's what you want. You watch Gunter Netzer play for Germany, and that night at Wembley in the 72 game, I think it was, when Germany tore us apart. I mean, Netzer walked onto the Wembley field as if he owned it. It was his stage. Well, tomorrow night will be Jack's stage.
If he plays.
He would, if he plays him. But I think no matter how many people are there tomorrow, how many fans, if there was a full house and they see Jack Grealish lead our England team out tomorrow night with his attitude and the way he walks out as if he's going to win you the game, I think he would set the place alight. And that would be put England on the front foot and set that crowd alight and give the ball to Jack. Don't play him on the left wing out the way. He's not a left winger. Put him in the middle of the field and let him control the game, like me and Alan Ball did and Colin Bell did in that game on that night behind you. And I've got that autograph over Franz Beckenbauer's face, is it?
Yes.
I played against France a couple of more times, and after that in America, and where he used to look at me as much as to say, I've seen you somewhere before.
Did you ever talk to him about the game?
No, I did. I've never had a conversation with him. I don't know why. I really, the only reason I didn't ask him for his shirt on that particular evening, because I wanted to come off the field and throw him a shirt at my dad. Because years earlier, I went to an amateur cup final to watch Hounslow play Crook Town, and two local lads from Chelsea played. And it was my first time at Wembley. I was 12, 13. And my dad asked me if I liked it. He came in from work on that Saturday night. He said, how did you enjoy Wembley? I said, it was unbelievable. Never seen a stadium like it. He said, well, I'll tell you something. He said, you'll play there one day. He said, but it won't be in an amateur cup final. And that's what my father Bill said to me. So that shirt had to be thrown in that night, and I did it in the long bar upstairs. And he was in his suit, and he had a little bit of paint on his hands where he'd been working, and he must have been telling these people that he was my father, and no one believed him. And when I walked in and threw the shirt at him, it kind of confirmed that all these people looked at each other and had to say he was telling us the truth, you know. But otherwise, I would have had Franz Beckenbauer's shirt on my wall unless he would have refused to take mine. I mean, I wouldn't have taken my shirt. He would have probably thrown that away because they were horrible shirts, weren't they? They were Admiral shirts. They were. I mean, the Germans were class where we had no class. So, I mean, Don Revie brought Admiral into with his shirts, and you know, when you look back at Bobby Moore in those sublime kit in 1970, you know. And then you look at that kit, we were, you know, we looked like a second-rate team against the Germans, but when the whistle blew, we certainly weren't.
So, do you know where that shirt is now?
Yes, it's hanging on Graham Bell's wall in Dallas, Texas, somewhere. Yeah, I think it's Dallas or wherever he lives in Texas. Yeah, my father was a friend of ours. My father's best friend around here was Graham's father, Arthur Bell, and without me knowing, he give it to Arthur to give to Graham. So it's now on his wall, hung proudly, and he probably tells the Americans, because they're so naive, he probably tells him he played. It's his shirt. Because the Hudson well, we didn't have names on our back in them days, did we? We
no,
just had numbers, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, going back to tomorrow's game, I mean, you made it pretty clear that you would build, if you were in charge of the England side, you would build tomorrow's team around Jack Grealish.
I can't see any other way. I mean, I can. I know what I think. The whole country knows that if they know anything about football, they'll know that we will go, and he will have in the back of his mind, if it has to go to penalties, we'll take that. He will believe in his heart of hearts that Harry Kane's got to come good sometime, and he's got to score sooner or later, and he'd be hoping that's tomorrow. But overall, he will play a very, very safe-looking team tomorrow. I will be very surprised if he plays Jack. The Germans will be pretty much in the same. They're not the Germans of old. They're nowhere near the Germans of old. And if ever we're going to beat them in a World Cup or Euros at Wembley, tomorrow's the greatest opportunity we've had. It's an unbelievable opportunity because this German team, I'd see about Harry Redknapp wrote in the paper yesterday, you know, the Germans are there for the taking, and I agree with Harry. I think that you know, I can't see too many dangers in the German team. You know, who's going to cause us too many problems. They beat Portugal 4-2, but the first two goals were own goals. They were pretty fortunate. The Portuguese defended terribly. England won't do that tomorrow because they'll have so many people back. They won't be doing that. They'll have 7 defenders across the field at all times, 8 defenders, and try to hit Germany on the break.
Do you think Southgate will match up with a German formation? I mean, the Germans have played 3 at the back or 5 at the back, depending which way you look at it. Do you think Southgate will go into? I mean, he's not really played 3 at the back so far in the tournament. He's gone with a straight 4-4-2 or 4-2-3-1, if you like. Do you think Southgate will want to match up to the Germans and play 3 at the back the way they do?
Well, I think it all depends, Tony. If he's brave enough to play the 2 wide players we have, he keeps bigging up Rashford, which I don't agree with at all. Young Saka is a tremendous talent for the future. He's been playing. If he plays them 2 and Harry plays, so he's got to play a back 5. he'll play Rice and Phillips in midfield again to plug all the gaps. So he's got a back seven really, and with two wide players, taking them on in the hope that they can set Harry up, and Harry can. I think he's had 2 shots all tournament in the 3 games. He said in the paper the other day, "I'm going to come good." So, but Lukaku said in yesterday's paper that he's world class, and I watched him last night. If he's world class, then I'm Frank Sinatra. That's all I got to say about Lukaku.
Well, you have always done it your way.
I've done it my way, and I actually am a better singer than what he is a player, Lukaku. I don't know what the Italian league must be like for him to score all these goals over there. I know he scored goals at Everton, but just his appearance to me, he doesn't look anything like the centre forward. I've watched the Polish centre forward 3 times in this tournament, and he's just on a different wavelength, a different planet. And yet,
you mean?
Lewandowski. I mean, what I love about these players, and what I don't like about people like Lukaku, is why are you going into a big match against Portugal saying you're world class, and then you're just putting yourself there to be shot? Lewandowski don't say a word. And that is the way to play the game, and I was with a couple of Polish people on the way home last night outside a pub called the Chelsea Potter on my way back from the hospital. And the first thing, as soon as they said they were Polish, a fella and his young lady, and they've been at Wembley the night before, I said, I must say that you've got the best centre forward in the world. And it was a little bit like, I felt so sorry for Lewandowski, because it reminded me so much of George Best being Irish and not being able to play in the World Cup. And there's this fella, the best centre forward in the tournament, and he's got to go home. And it just brings back a tinge of sadness. But I felt sad for George every 4 years that he had to go to Spain and be pictured by the swimming pool with Miss Worlds and all that when he didn't really want to be there. He wanted to be on the big stage. That was his stage, and I think that was what led to him to a lot of his problems. Really, truly.
Yeah, I mean Lewandowski. I can't help but think of Lewandowski as a Premier League striker. I mean, he's never come over to England to ply his trade. And I can think of a certain West London club who are looking for a number 9 at the moment.
Well, they've been looking for one since Costa left, haven't they? And it's quite. I mean, and I've been watching. They had Morata there for a while. I've been watching him with Spain, and I think, how on earth did he play for Chelsea? But I mean, what's wrong? What? Who's picking these players at Chelsea? And you'd have broke. With Abramovich's money, you'd have broke the bank for Lewandowski. I mean, this fella is a goal machine. He's big, strong. He's got everything required for a centre forward. And as I said to these people last night, and they confirmed it to me. They said he would never come to England because he's a family man, and he's settled down in Munich straight away. He loves Germany, and he's such a success at Bayern Munich. So all the signs are, when any talk of him coming to England is nonsense. He's a fantastic, and he wants to play in the Champions League every season.
Mm.
Wonderful centre forward. I mean, I always look at it and think, if young kids growing up, if you don't tell them how to play centre forward, you just sit them down and give them a video of this fella. All right, they're not going to be as big and powerful as him, but they'll watch his style of play, and the way he is. I've never seen a centre forward like who plays so unselfishly, yet gets so many goals.
Just mentioning Chelsea there. I mean, the one one of the big conundrums for Southgate must be whether he decides to play Mason Mount tomorrow after his 7 days of self-isolation.
Well, I heard Frank Lampard talk about it the other night, and Frank weren't very clear about it. He said, having known young Mount, I know when I used to play, if I was off for 7 days, and it wouldn't bother me a bit. It wouldn't. I think you get through on adrenaline alone. Mason Mount, I'm tired watching Mason Mount. He's got so much energy. This kid has got so much. He's got, the only problem I had with him in the early days was that he's got to conserve a bit of energy and slow his game down a bit. He's got so full of energy because he's so enthusiastic. He's the kid, he would be perfect. He's a perfect ally to Grealish in midfield to go and do what he has to do while Jack does what he has to do. I mean, that would be the perfect two in midfield for him. When one breaks, then the other breaks, and the one setting it up and the other one making them runs beyond the back four. Mason Mount would be the perfect player in midfield to get beyond the Germans. I just picked the other team, but for me, Mount and Grealish should be the two in midfield, pulling all the strings, and I'd have Foden out on the left, and take it from there. And I've played the two Chelsea fullbacks, and the rest of the team picks itself.
So would you not play either of Phillips or Rice as a holding midfielder?
No, I don't think they're needed against this German team, Tony. I really don't, unless you want to play for a draw. They're not going to create nothing. They haven't created anything in 3 games, so they're not going to start creating now. They played sideways too much. We don't want a game where both teams. If we're going to have a game where both teams are playing sideways, then it's going to be a stalemate. It's going to be a 0-0. So it'd be no surprise again if it does go to penalties, and then it'll be tears again. Whereas, what can I say? It's in '66 we had Nobby Stiles, but we had Bobby Charlton, we had Alan Ball. Bobby Charlton would get you a goal from midfield. These players are not going to get you a goal. They're not going to create a goal. They're not going to. When they got the ball, Harry Kane must be thinking to himself, "Where do I go? What do I do?" Because I'm not going to get it off them. They're going sideways, and if he plays them tomorrow, that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll be sitting there, and I know I can read the script now. After half an hour, we're going to say, this is going just as he planned it. It'll be 0-0, unless we get a ridiculous refereeing decision like the other night. There's been a couple already, but he's going to play the most negative team that we have. Which is when a country like ours has been waiting so long for success to get to a final. Basically, what he's doing, he's tossing a coin and saying, look, we're 50-50 here, and just hope it drops his way. Because the Germans will be hard to break down, and they'll be delighted if Jack don't play. In their camp, they'll probably, their manager, he's experienced enough. He's probably looked at England and he thought, 1, we don't want Mount running at us, and 2, we don't want Grealish on the ball. And if they don't get picked, he'll be delighted.
Yeah, I mean, there is no real reason to be negative about this game. And I don't want to disrespect Sweden or the Ukraine, but if England get through the Germany game, they'll be our next opponents. And the route really does open up to the latter stages if we can get through this game, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, as I say, it's a wide open affair, Tony. It's as we see that they got a man sent off last night for the Czech Republic. There ain't no pushovers in this tournament. They're really not. And the further they go, the tougher they get. There's a game tonight. I fancy Sweden, Ukraine. They're not a pushover, Ukraine. And I'm a gambler, and I put my money down last night and I lost. I thought Portugal were the best team, but there ain't no pushovers. I thought Belgium looked very average last night. I think Portugal, they set out their game plan was good. All right, they're not they can be a little bit negative at times. They play a very defensive system, but that is because they're very short on forward players. They haven't got the players to play up front, so they have to adapt to their style that suits them. But England have got no excuses. They have forward players. They have players that can get forward. They have the Mount who can get round defenders and put himself about and play off Harry Kane and get knockdowns, go past them. And they got the ace card in midfield, Jack. But last time he played Jack, he played him on the left wing, and I sat there wondering why. He plays there. People will say, well, he plays up there wide for Aston Villa, but that's a different ball game. Aston Villa are in a survival mode every year. It's all about escaping relegation until they get proper players up front, which they're slowly doing. And then you'll see Dean Smith drop Jack into a more creative role, although he's creating on the left. But when he plays for England now on the left, it reminds me of when we played John Barnes on the left. When he never see the ball. He was fantastic for Liverpool, but never see it when he played for England. And people say, well, he can't play at international level. Well, it wasn't he couldn't play at international level. It was because he never see the ball at international level. We didn't have the players to get the ball to him. And this is what will happen with Jack. The Germans will, if Jack plays on the left, the Germans will close him down and he won't get the ball. So they'll go right. The other way, they say, Grealish isn't in the game much. That's because he's wide on the left. Put him bang in the middle where he can get it. Where the night I played against the Germans, as I said to the fullbacks, get it into me. If you can't get it into me, get it off to Bally, and I'll get it off Bally, and then we start from there. And that's the way it panned out. And I think if you ask Mickey Shannon, Malcolm MacDonald, and Kevin Keegan up front that night, they got a great service.
Well, talking of great service, it brings me on to my next question. How do you explain Harry Kane's lack of goals in this tournament so far? I mean, obviously his club future's up in the air at the moment, and a lot of people are suggesting that he's got some doubts and worries in his mind, and that's perhaps leading to his indifferent form for England. But what do you put his lack of goals down to?
Well, it all boils down to, if you try and work it out, it all boils down to one of three things. Originally, I thought he was injured. Such was his lack of mobility up front, something that is brilliant in the Premier League. Two, I can't see the transfer problem being on his mind, because if you know Manchester City after you want to put on a performance. There's no better stage apart from the World Cup to show the Manchester City that you're the top player, which he hasn't done. So it can't be that. So you put it all down to how many chances have we created for him? How many balls he seems to have gone on the missing list because our midfield players are playing the ball so square all the time. Well, that's no good for a centre forward. If we had Alan Shearer on our podcast, he would tell you he don't want to play in a team where they keep playing the ball square. He wants it knocked into him, or he wants a winger going down and put it in those areas that he can attack. Well, Jack hasn't had that service. He's had a terrible service, if any at all, and he's had about 2 shots on goal. You can't expect him to come up with the goods. And it affects your way of thinking when I've never been a front player striker, but I've played with great ones. I've played with Osgood and I've played with Greenhoff, and you can tell if they're getting the service. We say, don't we? If they're the kind of players, if you get 5 chances in a game, they'll take 3 or 4. But if you're only getting 2, because you in 90 minutes, it's all right saying that you only get 1 chance and you've got to take it, but you've got to keep him in the game. Harry hasn't been in the game. He hasn't been a feature of any of our plays in the 3 matches. Scotland mate thought it was their birthday. You wouldn't have known Harry was playing. And I put that down to the manager. I put it down to his negative approach because centre forwards need service, and he hasn't had any.
Feel free to disagree with me here, but I sometimes wonder when I see Harry Kane play, I sometimes wonder whether he sometimes works too hard. He's coming too deep and he's getting involved in the lead-up play too much, when really, whether he's playing for Spurs or whether he's playing for England, where you want him is in the 18-yard box.
Well, the same can be said for, going back to Lewandowski. I mean, he's been all over the field in these games, but he's been where it matters when it matters, because of the way the Polish team are told before the game that your first ball must go into the big fella up front. You can see that. But that's not. I agree with. No, I wouldn't disagree with you. Not at all. I think him dropping deep for Tottenham works because he's got the kid's son running behind him. You can get away with that in the Premier League, and you pull defences about. But these in the Euros at Germany, if Harry drops deep tomorrow, the Germans will just sit there, and there'll be nothing to go in behind him, unless they push up. As I'm saying, if Mount's not playing, who's going to go behind him? Nobody. It certainly won't be Rice, and it won't be Phillips. Rashford likes one over the top, but this is not one of those games where you can hit balls over the top of Germany. They're gonna sit there making sure there's no space behind them. But I think if it continues Harry's form, it's going to be one of those pub quizzes, isn't it? What was wrong with Harry in the Euros? Because this is not £100 million player at the moment, and the people around the world must be saying, what all we've heard about this Harry Kane? What's all the fuss about? And they've offered 100 million, and then that's at the starting 100 million starter. And the transfer will still go ahead because he will continue to do it in the Premier League. But it hasn't done any good for his international career if he comes out of this without a goal. And it's going to be tougher to score now than ever because of the group stages. Ronaldo proved that. He got 5 in the first 3 games. He's a bit unfortunate last night. But when you think Ronaldo, if someone said to you before the tournament, he'll outscore him 5 in the group stages, then you'd had an argument with them, wouldn't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's so many. I think the thing is, Tony, as well, is Southgate's had so long before this tournament to get this team together to play a certain way. I mean, I wasn't a lover of 1966, but at least Ramsey had that team together. Apart from Jimmy Greaves getting injured, they knew exactly the way they were going to play throughout that tournament. There was no will he play? He knew once Jimmy Greaves was injured, Jeff Hurst come in and done a great job. So that was their team throughout the tournament. But there's too many questions asked every game we go into. Well, that can't be good for the players. If I'm playing in an England squad, I want to know I'm playing every game. Jack wants to know he's playing every game. I remember Alan Ball telling me, so the day he told me I was playing in the first game in the World Cup in '66, he said, I couldn't wait to get on the phone and tell my dad. And I knew that if I got in, I would stay in because Alf would go on performances. And although they started slowly, he said it all along, we'll get better. And they did get better. And the rest is history.
Well, that was going to be my final point in today's podcast, Al. I was going to ask you about the fact that the Germans have hardly made a change. I think I've just been going through their team lineups for the first 3 games, and they've made one change in those 3 games. Thomas Muller played against France, I think it was, and then Leroy Sané came in for him for the last 2 games. But apart from that, 10 players have played in all 3 games. with England, we've chopped and changed throughout. How much? I mean, how big an impact does that make on the players, and how much stronger does that make those 11 as a team?
Well, I think it's like anything else, any walk of life. It's like you're a journalist, you work in an office, and if you got the same people you're working with and around, and you're bouncing off each other all the time, it makes your job easier. If you're working with strangers, a different person every day, you have to try and judge out what's going on. And this can happen in football. I mean, that is why, going back into the 70s, I mean, when I went to Stoke, the team picked itself. We only had 14, 15 players. At Chelsea in 1970, we had 15 players to choose from, 16 players. So that made life, that's what gets that, what do you call it, that team togetherness. We knew who was playing every week. And at Chelsea, it was a little bit unfortunate that a couple of our players were getting a little bit too old when I left. And I was a baby of the team, but we knew Dave Sexton knew who our best 11 was, and he stuck to it. Basically, he had one problem with in the early days, that he didn't know where to play Charlie Cook. Really, he didn't know whether to play him wide on the right or in midfield. And then I came along, and he see a future in me, and he put Charlie. We had this conversation with Charlie, didn't we, on our podcast? And he agreed. There was one problem with Charlie. He never really had a position, and he was more comfortable out on the right. But he wouldn't have got a kick in the England team today if he was English, because they wouldn't have fed him like they don't feed Jack. He would have, the game would have bypassed him, because the England wide players they rely on their pace, and I don't think, as I say, they'll be, if they play Rashford and Saka tomorrow, they'll be running into a brick wall. That's basically what the Germans are. And the longer the game goes 0-0, the Germans will be as happy as what England will. Being a gambler, you're very tempted to back a 0-0 by the way the teams are setting up. But and Germany are just that little bit. You mentioned Thomas Muller. If they had the old Thomas Muller 5 or 6 years ago, I think that Germany would edge it. But he's not the same player.
Well, it's likely they're going to play, if they continue with a consistent sort of mode of selection. It's likely to be Havertz, Sane, and Gnabry up front.
Well, Sane's one of those players that he's from Manchester City, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
He's such a fantastic talent. He's a little bit like Grealish in that last third. He's the one that can do that little bit. He's got that little bit of magic in his feet. So England will have to beware. And will Southgate be thinking about playing 2 fullbacks that are going to march on, or one of them I suppose a lot will do. I don't know if Southgate will wait to see the German selection. I don't know. But I think where they struggle a little bit, Germany, is down the middle, up front. They haven't got a Gerd Muller or anyone like that these days. They haven't got Thomas Muller either. So it might be a situation where you think, do we need 3 at the back because they haven't got no strikers? Just play the 2 centre halves and put another one in midfield. Put either Rice or I wouldn't pick Rice. I'd put Phillips. After the first game, they said he was sensational against Croatia, but Croatia were awful. But put one of those. If you're going to have one man sitting in there, we'll have that, and then take a central defender away and put another attacking player in midfield and get at the Germans. That's one thing they won't want tomorrow night. They won't want to be attacked. They will be happy to sit there and let us play at the way the English play. Or the way Southgate play, I should say. Southgate.
Well, let's hope he's not Southgate tomorrow. On a mildly positive note, then, that we can hope that maybe England will go for it tomorrow and try and attack and try and get some goals. We're drawing end to today's podcast. Let's hope it goes well tomorrow, and that we can talk later in the week about England's progress to the quarterfinals. Al.
Well, I think at the end of the day, Tony, is they give contract. They've extended his contract, Southgate, before it said even if we lose tomorrow night. So that's a bad thing. That's a negative. You don't do that. They did that with Capello. You don't give him an extended contract, so he knows he's going into the game, win, lose or draw, he's going to stay in the job. Well, the FA are morons at times. They shouldn't do that. That's ridiculous. You know, they should be encouraging Southgate to go for a win tomorrow night. You know, put him in under pressure to play an attacking team. And everybody that goes in a pub tomorrow night or watches the game from home will be wanting England to attack. It's been said all through the tournament so far. In the friendlies beforehand, people say, "Oh, well, it's only a friendly," but wait till we get in the actual tournament itself. We will attack teams. Well, we haven't. So we better start doing that tomorrow. Otherwise, we got another few years of Southgate on our hands, and it won't be pretty. And you know that because I can tell by your smile as well. You agree? You agree with me, Tony?
I always think there should be an incentive for whoever you are in whatever organisation. There should be an incentive to succeed and an incentive to progress.
Absolutely.
And it sends out, to me, it sends out the wrong signals.
Absolutely. It's the FA. It's the English FA. They've done it before. They did it with Capello. They did it with Sven. You know, they gave them extended contracts when they think because you can go 25 friendlies without getting defeated, that's success. Well, it's not. It's all about building up for the big tournament. It's all about bringing in the right players, see who can play at that level, and that is something we don't do. I think Ericsson left the England job with the best record of all time, but they were all friendlies. They were all games that didn't matter. These are the games that matter when we come to tournaments, and these teams that come into the tournament now will judge England on the three group matches, not what they did 20-odd matches ago against Afghanistan, Azerbaijan and everybody else. You know, they won't be looking at that. They'll be judging us by what we've done in the group matches, and the opponents and the opposition fans will be hoping that England start out negative again because it's so much easier to play against.
Well, let's hope we can invoke the spirit of Alan Hudson and Alan Ball from that memorable game in 1975.
And France won't be playing, so they got that, you know.
Great. Okay, well, thanks, Al. Thanks.
Yes, Tony.
Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching the Alan Hudson Podcast, the podcast where you always get proper football and proper talk. Remember, if you do like what we do, just click on the like and subscribe buttons on YouTube. That'll be a great help to us. And we'll see you again for the next podcast very soon. Thanks very much for listening and thanks very much for watching.
Well done, Tony.